She vented about her arrogant billionaire boss. He heard it all, and the next day, everything changed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Sarah, a bright and ambitious woman, had spent the last few months working as the personal assistant to Jason Kingsley, one of the most powerful billionaires in the city. The kind of man whose name was on the cover of magazines, whose face was often seen at high-end charity galas, and whose presence dominated every room he walked into. But despite his fame and fortune, Sarah had always been more focused on her work than his impressive resume. She came from a humble background, and to her, the idea of wealth was just that, an idea. What mattered was the work, the passion, and the drive. Unfortunately, what she often found in Jason's office was arrogance and dismissiveness. It wasn't the work that bothered her, it was the attitude. She would spend hours organizing meetings, running errands, and preparing reports, only to be met with a cold, indifferent response. The type of boss who believed his wealth and power meant he was always right, no matter the situation. And Sarah was tired of it. On one particularly long and exhausting day, Sarah found herself venting to her best friend, Emily, during their lunch break at a small cafe down the street. As she sat there, picking at her salad, she couldn't help but express all the frustration she had been holding in for weeks. I swear, Emily, I can't take it anymore. Every day, it's the same. Jason acts like he's the king of the world, and I'm just some peasant to be ordered around. He's arrogant, entitled, and makes me feel like I'm invisible. Emily listened intently, offering sympathetic nods. You work so hard, Sarah. It's got to be exhausting dealing with someone like that. You deserve so much better. Sarah sighed, taking a sip of her iced tea. I don't know how much longer I can do this. He's impossible to please, and I'm just burning out. But what choice do I have? I need the job. She leaned back in her chair, looking up at the passing cars outside the cafe window. I just want to be seen, you know? To feel like my work matters. Little did she know, as Sarah continued to vent about her billionaire boss, Jason Kingsley was sitting just a few tables away, having a meeting with a potential business partner. He had overheard every word. Sarah didn't notice him, of course. She was too focused on her own frustrations. But Jason, who had been listening, felt a strange shift inside him. For the first time in a long while, he heard someone speak so honestly, so raw, about the way he treated others. And it made him question himself. As Sarah wrapped up her rant, she noticed Emily looking over her shoulder with a knowing look in her eyes. Sarah turned around and froze. Standing there, right behind her, was none other than Jason Kingsley. He had a slight smile on his face, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. I believe you were looking for me, he said, his voice calm but tinged with something else. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Oh my God, she muttered, her face turning bright red. I didn't see you there. Jason's smile remained, but there was no judgment in his expression. Instead, he seemed thoughtful, almost intrigued. I'm not used to hearing such candid feedback, but I appreciate your honesty, Sarah. Sarah's mind raced. She had just poured her heart out about the man standing before her, and now he was standing there, listening, processing every word. The air between them grew tense. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. I didn't mean, she started, but Jason held up a hand, cutting her off. No need to apologize. We all have our moments. Let's just say I've been given a new perspective. He paused for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. How about we talk tomorrow? I have an idea I'd like to share with you. Sarah was stunned, but all she could do was nod. What had just happened? Could it be that the man she had been complaining about had actually been listening all along? As she sat there, trying to process the moment, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Tomorrow, everything could be different. Little did she know, Jason's offer would turn her life, and her career, upside down in the most unexpected way. The next day, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The encounter with Jason Kingsley at the cafe left her confused and slightly unsettled. As she arrived at work, the usual hum of office life surrounded her, but today, the air felt different, heavier, charged with a new tension. She sat down at her desk, her mind replaying his calm words over and over. Asterisk, I appreciate your honesty, Sarah. Let's talk tomorrow. Asterisk, she tried to focus on the tasks at hand, but her thoughts kept drifting back to that moment. She had just vented about him, and now he wanted to talk? What did he expect from her? Was this a trap? Was he going to fire her for speaking so openly? Her nerves were on edge. Her phone buzzed, snapping her back to reality. It was a message from her best friend Emily. Asterisk, are you okay? That was intense. I'm dying to know what happens next. Asterisk, Sarah stared at the message for a moment, debating how to respond. She wasn't sure what was going to happen, but one thing was certain. She couldn't ignore it. He had heard everything. After what felt like an eternity, the clock finally struck noon, and Sarah found herself standing outside the elevator that would take her up to Jason's office. Her palms were sweaty, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what he was going to say or how he was going to approach this conversation. She knew he had a reputation for being cold, distant, and calculating. But for the first time, she wasn't sure what to expect. As the elevator doors opened, she stepped inside and pressed the button for the top floor. The ride was quick, but the silence felt like an eternity. When the elevator reached its destination, Sarah took a deep breath and stepped out, walking down the long corridor to Jason's office. His assistant, Claire, greeted her with a smile. He's expecting you, Sarah. Go right in. Sarah nodded, though her stomach twisted. She pushed open the door, and there he was, sitting behind his massive desk, his sharp eyes focused on the papers in front of him. His presence was commanding, as always. But today, something about him seemed different. There was a calmness to him, a softness in his demeanor that she hadn't noticed before. She hesitated for a moment before taking a seat across from him. He didn't immediately speak. Instead, he looked up at her, his expression unreadable. Finally, he broke the silence. Sarah, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, he began, his voice steady but not cold. And I've come to a conclusion. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Was he going to fire her? Or was this his way of putting her in her place? She had no idea, but she was about to find out. I want to apologize, Jason continued, his gaze softening. I've been too focused on the business side of things and not enough on the people who make this company what it is. I haven't treated you, or anyone else here, fairly. Sarah blinked, taken aback by his words. This wasn't the response she was expecting at all. She had expected him to scold her, to make her feel small for speaking out. But instead, he was apologizing? It felt surreal. You didn't deserve that, Sarah, he added, leaning forward slightly. You work harder than anyone here, and I haven't recognized that. I'm sorry for making you feel invisible. Sarah didn't know what to say. She had never heard him speak like this before. It was like a completely different person was sitting in front of her. I want to change that, Jason said, his voice firm with resolve. I'd like you to take on more responsibility here. A bigger role. I think you're capable of so much more than what you've been doing. And I want to make sure you get the recognition you deserve. The words hung in the air. Was this really happening? Was Jason Kingsley, the billionaire CEO, really offering her a promotion? Sarah had always known she was capable of more, but she had never imagined that he would see it too. She had spent so much time focusing on surviving her job, on dealing with his arrogance, that she had never considered that maybe, just maybe, he could change. And here he was, offering her exactly what she had hoped for, a chance to grow, a chance to prove herself. But as she processed his words, a wave of doubt washed over her. Was this real? Was he really offering this out of genuine remorse? Or was this just a way to keep her quiet? She could sense the sincerity in his voice, but she still couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. I don't expect you to trust me right away, Jason said, as if reading her mind. But I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be a better boss, a better person. Sarah sat there for a moment, weighing her options. This was the moment. She could either walk away, stay in the same position she had been in for so long, or she could take a risk, trust him, and see where it led. She took a deep breath. Okay, she said finally, her voice steady. I'll take the opportunity. But I'm doing this because I believe in the work, not because of what you've promised me. Jason nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Fair enough, he said, standing up. I'm glad we're on the same page. Let's make this work, Sarah. She stood up, her heart still racing, but now with a sense of determination. This was her chance. This could be the turning point she had been waiting for. And as she walked out of his office, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Hope that everything, finally, might change. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Sarah found herself stepping into a new role at Kingsley Enterprises, one that came with more responsibility, more respect, and, unexpectedly, more interaction with Jason. At first, it felt strange. For so long, she had kept her distance, simply trying to survive her job while dealing with Jason's cold demeanor. Now, she was working closely with him on several high-stakes projects, and the change in him was undeniable. He wasn't the same man she had vented about in the cafe. He wasn't perfect, he still had his moments of aloofness, but there was a sincerity to his actions that she hadn't seen before. They would sit together in meetings, hashing out strategies for the company, and he would listen to her ideas, actually considering them, something that had never happened before. She could see the effort he was making, not just to be a better boss, but to be a better person. But as much as she tried to trust him, a small part of her still couldn't let go of the past. It was hard to forget the arrogance, the coldness, the way he had dismissed her and others for so long. Despite his apologies and the changes she saw, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something deeper, something that hadn't been fully addressed. One afternoon, as Sarah walked through the company's sleek lobby, her mind racing with thoughts about her growing role and the changes in Jason, she spotted him standing near the elevator, talking with a few of the senior executives. The conversation seemed casual, but there was an edge to it, an intensity that made Sarah stop in her tracks. She couldn't help but listen in, her curiosity getting the best of her. "We need to make sure everything is in place for the upcoming board meeting," Jason said, his tone calm but authoritative. "The last thing we want is any surprises." One of the executives nodded. "We've got it covered. But you're sure about her, right, Sarah?" Jason paused for a moment, his gaze drifting toward Sarah, who was standing a few feet away, unnoticed. "I'm sure," he replied, his voice steady. "She's the right choice. She's proven herself." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had been so focused on her work and the changes in Jason's behavior that she hadn't stopped to consider what he had been saying about her behind closed doors. She didn't expect to hear this. "She's the right choice." The words echoed in her mind, and for the first time, she felt a rush of validation. Jason had seen her potential all along, even when she didn't see it in herself. It wasn't just about the apology or the promotion, it was about the belief he had in her abilities. She didn't have to prove herself to him anymore. It was a strange feeling, knowing that she had earned his trust. As she approached him, he turned to face her, a faint smile on his lips. "Sarah," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I was just telling the team how much I appreciate your work. You're doing great." The praise took her by surprise. She had worked so hard, but hearing it from him, the man who had once treated her like an invisible assistant, made her feel like she had truly earned her place. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little shaky. "I appreciate that." Jason's smile widened, and for a moment, Sarah saw something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before, genuine warmth. It was as if he had finally allowed himself to connect with the people around him, to let down the walls that had kept him distant for so long. But even as the moment lingered, Sarah's mind was still racing. She wasn't sure what it all meant, this newfound respect, this shift in their dynamic. Was this just about work, or was there something more? Was she being naive to think that Jason had changed, or was she finally seeing him for who he really was? The next few days were filled with more meetings, more late nights, and more unexpected moments of connection between her and Jason. They worked late into the evenings, poring over reports, discussing strategy, and even sharing a few laughs. Slowly, the walls between them began to crumble, but there was still an unspoken tension between them, a hesitation neither of them seemed willing to acknowledge. And then, one day, just when Sarah thought she had finally figured out the rhythm of her new role, Jason asked her to meet him for dinner. It wasn't unusual for him to ask employees out for business dinners, but this felt different. The way he had phrased the invitation, the look in his eyes, there was something more to it. She agreed, of course, not knowing what to expect. As she arrived at the upscale restaurant that evening, she could feel her nerves rising again. What was this about? Was he going to make another business offer, or was this something else entirely? When she walked in, she spotted him immediately. Jason was sitting at a table near the window, looking out over the city skyline. He stood up as she approached, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Thanks for coming," he said, his tone casual but sincere. Sarah sat down, trying to remain composed, though her heart was racing. "Of course," she replied, trying to hide her nervousness. The waiter arrived, and they ordered their food, but Sarah could feel the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. What was he going to say? After a few minutes of small talk, Jason finally spoke. "I know this might seem sudden," he began, his voice softer. Now, almost vulnerable. "But I wanted to talk to you about something. About us." Sarah froze for a moment, unsure of where this was going. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason took a deep breath, his eyes locking with hers. "I think you know what I mean." The words hung in the air, charged with a new, unspoken understanding. Sarah's mind was racing. Was this it? Was he about to confess some deeper truth, or was this just another business decision wrapped in a personal gesture? She wasn't sure, but one thing was clear: everything was about to change again. Jason's words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything felt suspended. Sarah sat there, her breath caught in her throat, trying to make sense of what he had just said. The restaurant around them buzzed with quiet conversation, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. Was this really happening? Was Jason really talking about us? Her mind raced, spinning with confusion and disbelief. She had been working closely with him for weeks, seeing a side of him that she never thought possible. But this was something entirely new. "Jason," she started, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm not sure what you mean." He leaned forward, his expression softening, the stern, businesslike persona she had grown accustomed to slipping away. "I think you do, Sarah," he said gently. "I think deep down, you know exactly what I mean." She wanted to pull away, to run from the uncertainty that was swirling around her. But she couldn't. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. Instead, she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I don't know," she said quietly, looking down at her hands in her lap. "You've been different lately, Jason. But I can't just jump into something without knowing what it really is." "What are you asking for?" Jason's gaze softened even further, and for the first time, she saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the kind that was usually hidden behind his power and arrogance. "I'm asking for a chance," he said, his voice low. "A chance to make things right, Sarah? A chance to show you that I'm more than just the cold CEO you thought I was. I want to be something more to you, if you'll let me." The sincerity in his voice made her stomach flip. She had never seen this side of him before. He wasn't just the ruthless billionaire anymore. He was a man asking for something real, something that went beyond business and power. But Sarah wasn't sure if she was ready for this. She had worked so hard to keep her distance, to protect herself from getting caught up in the games of the corporate world. And now here he was, breaking down the walls she had carefully built. "I don't know if I can trust you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've hurt people before, Jason. You've hurt me, and I'm not sure I'm ready to risk my heart again." Jason's face fell, and for a moment, Sarah felt a pang of guilt. She didn't want to hurt him, not really. But she had been burned before, and she wasn't willing to make the same mistake twice. "I understand," Jason said softly, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "And I'm not asking you to trust me overnight. But I want to prove myself to you. I want to show you that I can be the man you deserve." Sarah's mind spun as she tried to process everything. She had never been good at letting people in, at letting down her guard. And now, here was Jason, asking for something she wasn't sure she could give. But as she looked at him, sitting there with an open vulnerability she had never seen before, something inside her shifted. Maybe he had changed. Maybe he wasn't the same man who had once dismissed her and everyone else around him. Maybe he was worth the risk. "What do you want from me, Jason?" she asked, her voice steady now. "What are you really asking for?" Jason leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm asking for the chance to show you who I am now," he said quietly. "I'm asking for the chance to show you that I'm not just the boss. I want to be someone you can rely on, someone who values you for more than just your work." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She had always believed in the value of hard work, of earning respect through effort, but she had never allowed herself to think that someone could actually see her as more than that. Could Jason truly see her for who she was? Not just as his assistant or an employee, but as a person? "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she said, her voice faltering. "But I also don't want to keep shutting you out." Jason smiled softly, a warmth in his eyes. That's all I'm asking for, Sarah. A chance to prove myself. The tension in the air began to ease, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a spark of hope. Maybe this wasn't just about business. Maybe it was something more. As they sat there, the rest of the world seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in that moment. A moment that could change everything. She wasn't sure what the future held, or if Jason was truly ready for the kind of change he was asking for. But in that moment, she knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not yet. And whatever happened next, she was ready to face it, together. The days that followed were filled with subtle changes. Jason kept his word. He was different. He made a genuine effort to show Sarah that he wasn't the same arrogant billionaire who had once been indifferent to the people around him. At work, he was approachable, respectful, and most surprisingly, kind. It wasn't just his actions that had changed, though. It was the way he saw her. Sarah had never felt so valued at work before. She was no longer just a cog in the machine. She was an integral part of the team. The respect she had longed for was finally there, but she still couldn't shake the nagging doubt in her mind. Was it real? Was he really changing, or was this just a phase? She had seen glimpses of his true self, but could she trust that this new version of him would stick around? One afternoon, after a long day of meetings, Jason invited Sarah to his office. She was hesitant but agreed, unsure of what to expect. When she entered, she found him standing by the window, gazing out at the city skyline. He turned when he heard her footsteps, his expression unreadable. "Come in, Sarah," he said, his voice calm, but with an edge she couldn't place. She walked in and closed the door behind her, her heart beating faster than usual. "What's going on, Jason?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with curiosity. He motioned for her to sit. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice softer now, "about what you said that day in the cafe. About how you felt. I've been trying to put myself in your shoes." Sarah raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this conversation was going. "And what did you come up with?" she asked. Jason took a deep breath and walked over to his desk. He sat down, looking at her intently. "I've been running this company for years, but I've never stopped to think about the people who make it run. The people who work day in and day out, giving everything they've got. People like you, Sarah. You've given so much of yourself to this company, and I never really acknowledged that. Not properly." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't expecting an apology, not like this. Not from him. "I'm sorry," Jason continued, his voice low, "for making you feel like your work didn't matter. For treating you like you were invisible. I see now that you've been carrying more than just your job here, and I've taken that for granted." His words hit her harder than she expected. For so long, she had been dismissed, overlooked, and even though she had worked hard, it had never felt like enough. Now, here was Jason, not only acknowledging her work, but apologizing for the way he had treated her. It was more than she had ever hoped for. She didn't know what to say. "Thank you," was all she could manage. Jason smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I meant it. And there's something else I want to say," he added, standing up and walking around his desk. He stood in front of her, his eyes intense. "You've been a part of this company for a long time, Sarah. But I want you to know that you're more than just an employee. You're someone I respect, and I don't want to take that for granted anymore." Sarah blinked, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. This wasn't just about business anymore. It felt like something deeper was forming, something she wasn't prepared for but was starting to embrace. "I'm not asking you for anything, Sarah," Jason continued, "but I want to give you something. A real opportunity. More responsibility. More control. I want you to help me shape this company, not just as an assistant, but as a partner." His words took her by surprise. A partner? She had never imagined this. For so long, she had been focused on surviving in this company, trying to prove herself. And now, Jason was offering her a seat at the table, a role that went beyond what she had ever thought possible. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason smiled again, his eyes warm. "I want you to help me lead this company, Sarah. I want your input, your ideas. We've been running on autopilot for too long, and I need someone who's willing to challenge me. Someone who's not afraid to speak their mind." Sarah sat there in stunned silence, processing his words. It was everything she had ever wanted and more. She had spent so long doubting herself, wondering if she was good enough, if she would ever be recognized. And now, Jason was offering her exactly what she had been seeking, a chance to be seen, to be heard, and to make a real impact. But there was still a part of her that hesitated. Was this real? Could she trust him? She wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. This was a chance she couldn't let slip away. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice shaky with emotion. This is everything I've ever wanted. Jason walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Then don't say anything. Just take the opportunity. Show me what you can do. Sarah nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. She didn't know where this would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a future, one that she could shape on her own terms. As she walked out of his office that evening, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, things were finally starting to change. In the weeks that followed, Sarah dove headfirst into her new role. Jason had given her more responsibility, more autonomy, and for the first time in her career, she felt like her work was truly valued. She was no longer just the assistant to the billionaire CEO, she was becoming a key player in the company, a partner in shaping its future. The projects she had once only dreamed of being a part of were now in her hands. She had the freedom to lead, to make decisions, and to leave her mark on Kingsley Enterprises. But despite all the excitement and the opportunities, something inside her still hesitated. She wasn't sure if she could completely trust the changes. Jason had apologized, and he had made real efforts to change, but was it enough? Could he really change the way he had treated her, and others, for so many years? It wasn't just about work anymore. There was a deeper connection forming between them. She could feel it every time they interacted, every time they spent late hours together working on projects, sharing their thoughts, their frustrations, their dreams. There was a bond forming, but Sarah didn't know if she was ready for it. She had always kept her heart protected, never letting anyone too close, especially not someone like Jason. Yet, every time they worked together, every conversation they shared, she felt that wall she had carefully built start to crumble. It was subtle, but it was happening. One evening, after a particularly long day at the office, Sarah found herself walking out of the building with Jason. The day had been intense, back-to-back meetings, late-night brainstorming sessions, and the pressure of finalizing a major deal. But somehow, it had all come together. As they walked through the bustling city streets, Jason turned to her, his expression serious. "You did good today," he said, his voice low. Sarah looked up at him, surprised by the compliment. "Thanks, Jason. I couldn't have done it without the team." He smiled, but there was something more in his gaze. It wasn't just about the work anymore. "You're more than just part of the team, Sarah," he said softly, his words lingering in the air between them. "You're making a real difference here. You've proven that you can lead, and that's something I didn't expect." Sarah stopped walking for a moment, processing his words. "I'm just doing my job," she said, unsure of how to respond. Jason stopped too, turning to face her fully. "It's more than that, and you know it. You've changed the way I see things. You've changed me." His words hit her harder than she expected. For the first time, Sarah saw Jason not as the cold, arrogant CEO, but as a man who was willing to open up, who was willing to acknowledge her worth. It was a side of him she had never seen before, and it made her heart skip a beat. She wasn't sure what to say. Was he just being kind, or was this something more? But before she could say anything, Jason spoke again. "I'm sorry for the way I treated you before, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with sincerity. "I know I hurt you, and I know it's not enough to just apologize. But I want you to know that I see you. I see your potential, your strength, and I'm proud of everything you've accomplished." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Sarah didn't know what to do with them. It was everything she had wanted to hear from him, everything she had hoped for. But it also made her feel vulnerable, like she was standing on the edge of something new and unknown. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason gave her a small smile, one that was full of warmth. "You deserve more than just thanks," he said. "You deserve the opportunity to go even further, to take your place among the leaders here. I want to make sure you have that chance." Sarah felt her chest tighten as his words sank in. She had never imagined that she would be in this position, that she would be given this kind of opportunity, this kind of trust. But as she looked at him, standing there in front of her, offering her more than just a job, offering her a future, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. She could trust this change. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "I'm ready to lead, to take on whatever comes next." Jason's smile widened, And for the first time, Sarah saw something in his eyes, something more than just professional admiration. It was the look of someone who believed in her, who saw the woman she had become, and was ready to stand by her as she rose to new heights. As they continued walking together, Sarah felt something inside her shift. The walls she had spent so long building, the walls she had used to protect herself from hurt and disappointment, were starting to come down. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. She was no longer afraid to embrace it. The chance to lead, to grow, and to change was now within her reach, and with Jason by her side, maybe she could finally see herself for who she truly was. In the days that followed, Sarah settled into her new role with newfound confidence. The change wasn't just in her job, but in how she viewed herself. Jason's words, his actions, had given her a sense of worth she hadn't realized she was missing. She was no longer just an assistant. She was a leader, someone who could shape the future of Kingsley Enterprises. It was a lot to take in, and sometimes she found herself wondering if she was ready for it all. Could she handle the responsibility? Would the changes last? As she worked side by side with Jason, the doubts began to fade. He was a different man now, one who valued her ideas, listened to her concerns, and gave her the space to grow. They began to make a powerful team, one that could take the company to new heights. They spent long hours in meetings, strategizing, making plans, and pushing each other to do better. The office, once a place of tension, was now filled with energy, collaboration, and the promise of something bigger. But despite the progress, there were still moments of uncertainty. Jason's past behavior, the coldness, the arrogance, lingered in Sarah's mind. It was hard to shake the feeling that the old Jason was still somewhere beneath the surface. She caught herself looking for signs that he would slip back into his old ways. Would he start shutting her out again? Would he start treating her as just an employee rather than an equal? It was a fear she couldn't completely push aside, no matter how much she wanted to trust him. One evening, as they worked late to prepare for a major business presentation, Jason turned to her, his face serious but not cold. "Sarah, I need you to know something," he said, his voice low. She looked up from the papers in front of her, her heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" she asked, sensing the weight in his words. He hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I know that things have changed between us," he said, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. "And I want you to know that I'm committed to this. To you. To making sure that we both succeed." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had heard the words before, but this time, they felt different. This time, they felt real. "I'm not just offering you a job, Sarah," Jason continued. "I'm offering you a partnership. I want you to know that, from now on, we're in this together. Not just as boss and employee, but as equals. As partners." The sincerity in his voice made her heart swell, but at the same time, it made her nervous. This was what she had always wanted, right? A chance to be treated as an equal, to have her voice heard, to be recognized for her work. But it was also a huge leap of faith. Trusting Jason again, after everything that had happened, wasn't easy. She had been burned before, and the scars still lingered. "I believe in you, Sarah," Jason said, his voice steady and reassuring. "I know you can do this. You've proven it time and time again. You're more than capable, and I need you on my side for this next chapter." His words hung in the air, and for the first time, Sarah didn't feel doubt. She didn't feel fear. She felt a sense of belonging, of purpose. This was her moment. This was her chance to step up and make a real impact. She smiled, the weight lifting from her chest. "I'm with you, Jason," she said, her voice firm with conviction. "Let's do this." From that moment on, everything changed. The lines between boss and employee blurred, and they truly became partners in every sense of the word. The work they did together was more than just business, it was personal. They pushed each other to be better, to do better, and to create something that would last. As Sarah took on more and more responsibilities, her confidence grew. She was no longer the woman who doubted herself, who wondered if she was good enough. She was a force to be reckoned with, a leader in her own right. And through it all, Jason stood by her, not just as her boss, but as her equal, her partner. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Sarah was ready. She was ready for whatever came next, because she knew that with Jason by her side, anything was possible. As weeks passed, Sarah found herself more and more immersed in her new role at Kingsley Enterprises. The lines between work and personal life began to blur, but in a way that felt natural. She was no longer just an employee. She had become an essential part of the company's success, and more importantly, an equal partner in every sense. Jason's leadership had transformed, and with his guidance, Sarah had blossomed into the confident leader she had always aspired to be. The trust between them grew stronger with each passing day. They spent hours discussing ideas, plans, and strategies, both inside the office and over dinner meetings, and slowly, Sarah started to see a side of Jason she never thought possible. He was no longer the cold, distant billionaire who saw everyone as a tool for his success. He was becoming a man who understood the value of people, of relationships, and of true partnership. But as they grew closer, so did the stakes. Sarah had become an integral part of the company, but she also found herself standing at the edge of a personal dilemma. She couldn't ignore the deepening connection between her and Jason, the moments when their conversations went beyond business and veered into something more personal. Yet, despite their closeness, Sarah hesitated to cross that line. She wasn't sure if she was ready to explore a relationship with him. The fear of vulnerability still loomed over her, and the last thing she wanted was to make things complicated, especially when everything seemed to be going so well professionally. One evening, as they worked late together on a major presentation, Jason leaned back in his chair, studying the documents in front of him. Sarah watched him for a moment, noticing how the lines of tension around his eyes had softened over the past few months. He was no longer the hard-edged CEO. He had become someone more approachable, someone she could actually relate to. The quiet of the office hung in the air, and for the first time, Sarah decided to voice what had been on her mind for weeks. "Jason," she said softly, breaking the silence. He looked up, his expression curious. "I need to ask you something," she continued, her voice a little shaky. "What are we doing here? I mean, I know we've made incredible progress, but is this just business, or is there something more between us?" Jason set down the papers in his hand and leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers. For a moment, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if she was ready to hear his answer, but the question had been lingering, and she needed to know where they stood. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady, "I've been thinking about this too. We've come a long way, and I won't lie, I've started to feel something deeper for you. Something I didn't expect." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. His words were exactly what she had feared and, at the same time, exactly what she had hoped for. She had never imagined that Jason would feel the same way. She had always seen him as the powerful CEO, the one in control of everything, and never once did she think she could be more than just an employee to him. But here they were, standing on the brink of something more. Jason continued, "I know this isn't easy, and I don't want to complicate things. But I believe we've built something real here, Sarah. We've built trust, respect, and," he paused, searching her eyes, "something more, something that goes beyond just business. But only if you feel the same way." Sarah's heart raced as she processed his words. She had never been one to rush into things, especially not with someone she worked so closely with. But in that moment, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she was ready to take that leap. "I do," she whispered, the words coming out before she could second-guess herself. "I feel the same way." Jason's face softened, and for the first time, Sarah saw him smile. Not the calculated, business smile he wore at meetings, but a genuine, heartfelt smile. "Then let's see where this takes us," he said. The air between them shifted, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a sense of clarity. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that with Jason by her side, both personally and professionally, anything was possible. Together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they continued working, side by side, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She was no longer just an assistant. She was part of something bigger. She had found her place, not just in the company, but in Jason's world as well. As the weeks passed, Sarah and Jason's relationship grew stronger, both professionally and personally. The bond they had built in the office began to translate into their private lives, and they found themselves spending more time together outside of work. They still had their moments of doubt and uncertainty, but together, they learned to navigate the challenges that came their way. Jason's transformation into a more understanding, compassionate leader was something Sarah had never expected. She had once seen him as cold and distant, but now, She saw him as a man who cared deeply about the people around him, who valued honesty and transparency. The company was thriving under their leadership, but it wasn't just about the success of Kingsley Enterprises. It was about the journey they had taken together, the trust they had built, the respect they had earned, and the love they had found in each other. On the day of the company's annual gala, as they walked into the event hand in hand, Sarah felt a sense of pride that she had never felt before. Not just for the work they had accomplished, but for the person she had become and the person Jason had become. They had both changed, and it had made them stronger. As they stood together in front of their colleagues and friends, Jason turned to Sarah with a smile. "We've come a long way," he said softly, "and I couldn't have done it without you." Sarah looked at him, her heart full, and smiled back. "And I couldn't have done it without you." The night was filled with laughter, celebration, and promises for the future, but as the evening came to a close, Jason led Sarah outside into the cool night air. He stopped her by the steps, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. "There's one more thing I want to say," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I want you to know that, no matter where this goes, no matter what happens next, you're the best decision I've ever made." Sarah's heart fluttered, and without thinking, she kissed him softly, a kiss that spoke of everything they had been through, everything they had built together. It wasn't the end of their story, it was just the beginning. Together, they were ready for whatever the future held.